What's up, YouTube? It's the Action Figure Grader coming back to you with another video. And I thought today we would take a look at the ComicLink.com auctions that ended mid-May. And there were lots of really good deals. I feel like in this batch of CGC 9.8 graded comics, not just Star Wars, but across the gamut, across the different comic book lines. I don't like to do this too often, but I'm of the opinion that now is a really good time to be picking up CGC graded comic books because the market is down. And I personally am focused on spending my hobby money on comic books right now. I've kind of taken a break on action figures. I've kind of got everything I really want to get right now. And prices haven't really dropped that much. And I feel like they're going to drop further for action figures. Comic books, that's not the story right now. I feel like comic books have come down anywhere from 50 to 75% in some cases for a lot of these really good books that I've always wanted to have in my collection. So we're going to be covering a lot of books. I haven't bid on any of these, and this is not everything that was for sale, obviously, on ComicLink. Every single month there's great deals. But I've got a lot to go through, so I'm going to go ahead and dig right in, and I'm going to try to be somewhat rapid fire so I can get through these in a normal time frame. We're going to start with the Star Wars comic books because some of you don't collect anything except Star Wars books. So I wanted to show you the Star Wars books to start out with, and that way you guys can drop off if you want to, if you don't want to watch the rest of this video. But this is the Star Wars number 35, which I do have. I've got 2 copies of this, but they're both direct editions. This is the newsstand, and you can tell that this was recently graded because it's got newsstand edition written up here. This is the first face-to-face meeting of Luke and Darth Vader in comic books. It's a fantastic cover. I would love to have bid on this. I really would have, but I'm saving up for another key book right now, so I couldn't bid on it. But this is the newsstand. You can see the barcode in the lower left. This one ended for $235. That is a steal of a deal. I hope one of you all were able to buy this book because I paid more for my direct editions. And the newsstand is much harder to find for these early 1980s books because this is about when they were starting to transition over to direct editions for the most part. This is the first time I've seen a newsstand for this book, and this was a great deal. I wish I'd bid on it now, but I'm glad I didn't because I'm trying to save up for really big books right now. And this one does not fall in that category, although this was a fantastic buy. It looks like it did have some scuffing on the inner well there, so I'm going to spend a little bit more time on the Star Wars books versus some of the other books because, you know, these are what you guys tune in for. This is another one I'd like to add to my collection fairly soon. This is the adaptation of Return of the Jedi, issue number 1. Great cover. I don't know if it's ever going to really advance in value that much. It's going to be kind of a slow creep. But this one sold for $132. It's a Bill Sienkiewicz cover, and I love his artwork. I've got a number of different non-Star Wars books. I've got Elektra number 1. I've got Something is Killing the Children number 16 with the homage to Elektra number 1. And in general, I just love his artwork. He's got a very distinctive art style. And this is a book I'd like to add to it, to my collection at one point. But 132, that's a great buy. You know, usually 150-ish is what they go for on eBay, and you're avoiding sales tax. At least I am when I buy on ComicLink. Keep in mind that these prices, 132, you got to add 3% for the buyer's premium. So it's a very reasonable buyer's premium on ComicLink. I love ComicLink. Every single month they have incredible books for sale. Star Wars Clone Wars number 2, the second appearance of Ahsoka Tano. This one sold for $235. That's about where this one's going. I've seen as high as $285 on eBay, so pretty good price savings there by buying this one on ComicLink because you avoid the sales taxes and it's only a 3% buyer's premium. But again, I've talked about this book at length, and I don't like this cover that much because it shows Ahsoka kind of cowering in the corner. It makes her look really weak, but it's her second appearance comic book, and there's value there. It's a lot cheaper, obviously, than her first appearance comic, which right now is going, Clone Wars number 1, which is going for between $1,600 and $1,800. This one sold for $235, a nice budget-friendly option in a CGC 9.8 if you don't want to pay up for her first appearance comic book. Next up, let's start digging into some of the other comics. As you can see by the tabs I've got open at the top of the page here, I've got a bunch of comics. This is one I'd like to add as well. This is Daredevil 158. This is the beginning of Frank Miller's iconic run on the Daredevil series. So it's an important book from an artist standpoint. There's not like a big first appearance or anything in there. But the reason that this book goes for so much money is because, number one, it's from 1979, so there's not a ton of 9.8s, but it's also Frank Miller's start of the Daredevil run, which, if you follow Daredevil books, you know that Frank Miller's run in the Daredevil series is pretty incredible, and it's historic. And I think it'll go down, continue to go down as a want-to-buy book. This one sold for $16.11, so big number there. But that's about right. I mean, that's about where it's going. $1,600 to $1,800 is where this book usually sells for in a 9.8 grade. Next up is one I do have in my collection, although mine is not signed by Todd McFarlane. This one is a 9.8 for Incredible Hulk number 340, a pretty incredible cover, also signed by Todd McFarlane. I would love to have a signed one, but in a 9.8, this one sold for $1,850. I thought that was a pretty good buy. I was expecting around $2,000. Just a standard 9.8 for this book in a direct edition, you're looking at around $1,400 to $1,600. So to get a signed one for $1,850, I thought that was a great buy. Now the newsstand, there is a newsstand right now at auction on eBay, so I'm sure I'll cover that at some point. Right now there's 9 days left and it's already at $2,500, so it's going to be big money. But I think for me, if I'm going to get a second copy of Incredible Hulk 340, I would love to get either another direct edition or a signed Todd McFarlane. And to get it for $1,850, that was actually a really good buy, although I know it seems like a lot of money. Another one on my want list is Wolverine Limited Series. This was the direct edition in a 9.8. This is the first solo Wolverine comic, and I love this cover. I'm going to get this one at some point soon. This one sold for $606. That is way down. Way down. This was going for about $900 in the direct edition. In the newsstand, you're probably looking at somewhere between $1,100 and $1,300 would be my guess. I don't know what the one... There was a newsstand that sold at ComicLink last month. I can't remember what it sold for. I want to say it was $1,100. So a little under 2 times what a direct edition goes for. But $606, that's the cheapest I've seen in a long time. Next up is a newsstand for Punisher War Journal number 6. Newsstand edition, and this is the first meeting of Wolverine and the Punisher in comic books. I've got a direct edition for this one. I paid $150 for mine. This one sold for $250. So again, it's the newsstand edition, so you're going to pay a little bit more money for it. But I think this book is a really good buy right now in either the direct or the newsstand. I think that this book is undervalued, way undervalued. The Wolverine number 88, which is the first meeting of Deadpool and Wolverine in comics, that one has jumped up, obviously. That's around $350 to $450. But this is another book that if you collect other comic books other than just Star Wars books, start looking for Punisher War Journal number 6 in either the direct or the newsstand, because it's undervalued right now, in my opinion. $253, again, took that one home. This was an interesting one. I would love to have owned this, but this is an error. This is a double cover. You can see right here where it says double cover. First cover got a 9.8. Interior cover got a 9.8. For G.I. Joe number 14, the first full appearance of Destro. Great book. And, you know, that happens sometimes where these books accidentally get 2 covers. And what CGC does, they grade the front cover as well as the interior cover. I've even seen triple covers and quadruple covers. So they do happen. And whatever cover gets the highest grade, that's what gets it on the label. In this case, both covers got a 9.8. So it's a first appearance of a pretty major villain within the G.I. Joe universe. Both covers got a 9.8, and this one sold for $703. So that's a little bit higher than what a standard direct, just a single cover, would sell for in a 9.8. Probably more like $450 would be my guess. So somebody paid up because it is an error, a factory error, so to speak, if you're using action figure lingo. So pretty cool error book. I would love to have it. I'm just going to go for a standard, standard cover 9.8 for that one eventually. But I'm not going to get any G.I. Joe comics until I get G.I. Joe number 1. You got to have G.I. Joe number 1, folks. That's my number 1 book I like to get from that series. Maybe G.I. Joe Special number 1 would be another one. A key 90s book, New Mutants 87. Obviously, New Mutants 98 is Deadpool's first appearance. That usually goes for about $1,600. But another nice alternative is New Mutants 87, the first appearance of Cable. And great cover. That's on my short list. That one sold for $600. That's about the going rate, usually $650 on eBay. So a little bit of savings there. Next up, we've got Marvel Superheroes Secret Wars number 8. This is the origin of the black costume for Spider-Man, or the alien symbiote that becomes Venom, or that, takes over Venom. But this is another key book. In a direct edition, there's a lot of them on the census, and they're relatively inexpensive. This one sold for $4.76 because it's got faded colors. Look how faded the colors are on the front of this book versus this one. This one's got very sharp, vibrant colors, although it looks like it might have a Newton ring right there. But that one sold for $600. This one sold for $4.76. But this one didn't have any Newton rings, so I think I would have leaned towards buying the cheaper one without the Newton rings with the slightly faded cover. I don't think it's faded, because if it was faded, it wouldn't get the 9.8. What I should say is that the ink that was used to make this cover didn't give it a full press. So in this case, just missed some of the color on that one. But anyway, you got to look out for Newton rings on that book for earlier graded copies. Next up, Amazing Spider-Man number 280, the first team appearance of the Sinister Syndicate. I can never pronounce that. This one is relatively inexpensive. It's a decent cover. It's got Silver Sable there and Spider-Man, and then the Sinister Syndicate, which has Rhino and Beetle and Boomerang and Hydro Man and a bunch of different villains form this kind of super group. Now, that's the first appearance, and this book sold for $88, so it's really cheap. Versus this book that I have two of, which is Amazing Spider-Man number 281. And this is the better cover if you're going after the Sinister Syndicate. This is all the different guys. And I have this book. I love this book. I had this in my childhood collection, as I've covered before. But this one sold for $280. So $230. And this one's actually held up really well. I paid last year during the height of the comic book boom, I paid $185, and I think I paid $200 for this one. There's not many of these on the census, and it's actually gone up in value since I bought it, despite the comic book market cratering. So that's a really tough book to get, and I love it. I just think it's an amazing cover. And it turns out that my investment in those two 9.8s was a really good buy. So I've got two of these. I would love to get the Mark Jewelers insert newsstand version of this book, but it is super rare. I mean, there's less than 20 of them on the census, but it's an awesome book. Another Spider-Man book is Amazing Spider-Man number 312. It shows the Green Goblin and the Hobgoblin fighting. The direct edition's relatively inexpensive. There's a lot of them on the census, but it's got pretty iconic Todd McFarlane art. This one sold for $141, which is a good buy. On eBay, they go for $160 plus. Next up is a book I did recently purchase. I didn't get this one, but I bought mine on My Comic Shop. This one sold for $700, and that's Amazing Spider-Man number 316. This is the first full comic cover appearance of Venom. Obviously, his first interior comic appearance is number 300, which is very expensive in a 9.8. But this is a good backup or secondary option, and I love this cover. It's great Todd McFarlane art, and I did recently pick this one up on My Comic Shop, so I look forward to showing that to you soon. This one sold again for $700. I paid a little bit less for mine, although mine is not quite as nice as this one. I've got a little bit of a spine tick right here by the price tag there. Next up, we've got one that's on my short list, Amazing Spider-Man number 361 in a newsstand, the first comic book appearance of Carnage. If you're going to get this book, get the newsstand, because there are so many of them on the census in the direct. There's a lot of them on the census in the newsstand as well, but it's a pretty iconic Mark Bagley cover. And if you're going to get it, though, get the newsstand. This one sold for $600. I've seen as cheap as $550 for the newsstand of Spider-Man 361. Next up is Ultimate Spider-Man from 2011, number 1. This is the origin of Miles Morales. This is another book that I think is probably undervalued a little bit. His first appearance, obviously, is Ultimate Fallout 4. The first printing of Ultimate Fallout 4 goes for about $1,600 to $1,800. His origin book goes for $600. This one sold for $607. I think this is a good investment right now. This book has come down a lot. It was around $900. Now it's about $600. It's a modern book, so just keep that in mind, that there's probably a lot of them on the census, but it's got a big black border on both sides of the book on the cover, so it makes it tough to get a 9.8. But to me, if I'm gonna spend the big boy money on a Miles Morales book, Ultimate Fallout 4 in the first print is probably a good bet. Right now it's going for 3 times what his origin book goes for. So to me, I don't know if I'm going to spend up for Ultimate Fallout 4 in a first print, although I have bid on them in the past. But this is a nice secondary option. Batman books, Batman 635. I think this is a good buy right now. This is the first Jason Todd as Red Hood. And there are a lot of these on the census, but it's come way down in price. This one sold for $260, and there was another one I believe that sold. I don't know if I pulled it up or not, but it sold for like in the $330 range. But I think this book has come down enough that I think it makes sense to buy it pretty soon. So great cover. Next up is Batman number 428, The Death of Jason Todd. Death comic books in general don't do very well. They don't hold up their value very well. This book is the exception. Batman number 428, Death in the Family storyline. This is the death of Jason Todd. I think this book will hold its value long term. It's always been a really key book, and it's one of the few death books within comics that's actually held its value, and if not gone up in value. This one sold for $413. That's down, obviously, with the comic book market down. In a newsstand, you're probably looking at $650 to $700. But that's one death book that I would be comfortable buying at that price point. Next up, Batman 608, the second printing. This is an amazing Jim Lee cover, the beginning of the Hush storyline. I think there's a good chance that we see Hush in the next Robert Pattinson Batman film. There's talk that it might be Hush, it might be Clayface, who knows. But if you're going to get any of the Hush books, get the second print. This is a pretty iconic book and has been proven to be enough of demand and held its value long term that I think it's worth buying right now because it's come way down in price. This one sold for $404. This one sold for $429. So the second printing for Batman 608. If you're going to get that one, get the second printing. And right now is a really good time. That's come way down in price. Here's the other Batman 635. This one sold for $313. And again, on eBay, you're probably talking $350, if not higher, plus taxes. So again, those are two modern Batman books that if you're going to get a modern book, get it in a 9.8. And right now, that's a really good time. I think right now is a good time to get both of those. This is one that I don't know if it'll ever do anything long term, but it's just a book that I appreciate. I love the prestige format of Batman Mask of the Phantasm. It's based on the animated movie. I don't know if you've seen that movie, but it's an amazing movie. I love it, and I would love to have this one just for my collection. Again, I don't know if it'll ever do anything long term, but it's been around long enough that I think it's held its value pretty decently. This one sold for $202, which is a great buy. On eBay, they're usually $300 to $350, but that's just kind of like one of those books that you buy and hold forever. Another Batman key that's way down in price is Vengeance of Bane, the first appearance and origin of Bane in comics. This one sold for $294. $294 is the lowest I've ever seen for this book, and it's just an awesome book, awesome cover. I absolutely love it. Be careful on this one because the backs on Vengeance of Bane can get really easily scuffed. It's an all-black cover. Maybe I might be getting it mixed up with a different book. So there's Batman, a killing joke. That's the one I'm thinking of, is Batman, a Killing Joke. That one's got an all-black cover with the Joker card on the back. That one gets a lot of scuffs. I don't think Vengeance of Bane has a black cover, but it does get scuffs really easily, though, so just be careful when you're buying that one. And then finally, Predator #1. This is another book on my want list. It's come way down in price. It peaked out at like $750 or $800. This one sold for $424. The first appearance of Predator in comics, a pretty awesome cover from Dark Horse from 1989. I'm hoping to get that one this summer sometime. But I love that cover. It's just one of those killer covers that really captures what Predator is. And I'm kind of reliving my childhood between G.I. Joe and Predator, maybe Transformers #1. I want to get some of those kind of key 1980s toy line books or movie books that I kind of grew up with. And this is definitely a good one to get for your collection. So anyway, just, again, kind of different, a little different, kind of covering some other collectibles that are out there, not just Star Wars related. But ComicLink.com is a really great website for buying key issue 9.8s or whatever you collect. It doesn't have to be 9.8s, but they've got a little bit of everything for everybody. And thank you so much for watching, and I'll be back soon.